So welcome everyone. We are presenting to you a webinar on hyperconverged infrastructure. What is it? What is hyperconverged infrastructure and why does it matter to you? My name is Rory Chowdhury. I'm the Solutions Marketing Director for VMware in EMEA, and I am delighted to be joined by Lee Dilworth, our Principal Systems Engineer for the Storage and Availability Business Unit and for the EMEA field.
Yeah, thanks Rory, great to be here.
And we did this about 7 or 8 months ago, so it's great to start again and see where we've got to in the intervening time.
Well, we've got a better camera now and lighting, so that's a step in the right direction.
I know, grave danger of professionalism breaking out. So Lee, I'd like to start though with something that I've been banging on about in carpool videos and so on and so forth, which is about the change that we're seeing in the market over the last few years, but particularly the last couple of years, the emergence of this sort of newly refreshed importance of data, the changes in customer requirements. Can you sort of riff on that for a while, please? Because I think you have pretty strong opinions on that too.
Yeah, sure. And yeah, this is something I think that customers out there that have been with VMware for a number of years will have grown up with a certain kind of architecture and become used to a certain way of doing things, and we all know what those approaches are in terms of managing storage, compute, network as three separate silos. And I guess if we look back at where VMware came from, one of the things we became very good at and very well known for is obviously the ability to efficiently abstract and manage compute and memory away from hardware.
Yeah.
And that obviously drove a lot of efficiencies in data centers, and we all remember the good old days of physical to virtualization migrations and all the benefits that came with that. And then over the years, as environments grew and the demands on businesses grew, there was a need to kind of step it up to the next level of operational efficiency. And this kind of led to, I guess, the introduction of converged infrastructure solutions, the likes of vBlocks, where we started to see compute, storage, and network devices in single racks. And then in more recent years, we've seen a massive shift now towards what we define as hyperconverged infrastructure. And what this basically comes down to is a lot of the same basic principles that VMware is based upon, which is the abstraction away from hardware of key data center services. And the two key services that we needed to address as a company were obviously networking, which we're driving with NSX, and storage. Bring storage virtualization inside the management of the software stack. So really, when you look at what is HCI all about, what it's really about is operational simplicity. What VMware are doing with HCI, and we'll talk a little bit more later about vSAN, is we're trying to bring that same level of abstraction and simplification into all of the different resources within the data center, so that all of them can be managed through a single set of tools, a single set of workflows. And it's about giving that time back to IT teams to focus on more important tasks that actually benefit their business, as opposed to keeping the lights on, performing the same basic repetitive tasks over and over. So that's really what's at the heart of this.
Right, okay. And so, we talk an awful lot about encouraging customers to modernize their data centers, to head towards this sort of levels of agility that they need through, particularly through automation. How does hyperconverged infrastructure play into this pathway of modernizing data center? Or is it the way you modernize a data center? I mean, how would you characterize that?
Yeah, I think one of the things that customers were looking for is a way to simplify how they architect their data centers. And if you look at traditional 3-tier architectures where you might have a compute layer, some kind of switching layer, and then a storage layer, there was a lot of proprietary stacks in there in terms of management, operational interfaces, APIs, and there was a lot of complex moving parts there. And it made it very difficult for customers to change from one kind of environment to another, or to scale up and down as they wanted to, and there needed to be a way to simplify that. And that was something that we were constantly put under pressure from customers for many years. Is you've got to make this simpler. We're scaling this up massively. We've gone from a few VMs to a few thousands or tens of thousands. There's got to be a simpler way to build this out without having to constantly go back and look at our architecture and figure out how it should grow. And and as the industry moved on, and we got to the time when hyperconverged infrastructure started to become a popular way of building out data centers. The reason it became popular is because it brought those characteristics to the table in terms of you could pick a certain kind of building block that would deliver a certain amount of compute, storage, and network capacity, and then you could just add to it as you needed to, and without actually being locked into any one particular platform. You had the ability to choose from a wide variety of vendors. If we look at our HCI solution, which is powered by vSAN, we have different options for consuming it, whether that's a turnkey appliance like VxRail from Dell EMC, or whether it's one of over 150 certified what we call vSAN ready nodes from all of the vendors out there. There are lots of ways now for customers to consume this, and they can pick the size that's appropriate to them, and then they can scale up and out as they need. And the ability to do that, I guess, that this was something that became very popular. We used to all see those pictures of the Facebook or the Google data center where it was just rows and rows of servers with cabling, very simple, very easy to manage, very easy to deploy, and that was something that a lot of customers aspired after, that level of simplicity in building out their data centers. That's really what HCI has enabled.
Cool. Let me just very quickly remind anybody watching this that we have people standing by to answer questions. So if you do have a question along the way, adding to the ones that I'm going to be asking Lee, please do type it into the Q&A box on the webcast console, and we will respond to them as quickly as we possibly can. I want to pick up on something you said, Lee. In fact, I want to pick up on a couple of things, but just to mention that we are still totally devoted to customer choice. So you mentioned the hardware partners, our customers, whoever their existing hardware vendors are, if their servers are from Dell or HPE or Lenovo or Fujitsu or Hitachi or whoever else you care to mention, we are working with all of those partners to create vSAN ready nodes, and with quite a number of them to create integrated hyperconverged appliances. But what I'd like to touch on next is to talk to you about how this relates to vSAN. So I know that we have hyperconverged infrastructure, it's powered by vSAN, but then there's vSphere in there as well. So what's the relationship? How do you characterize it? How would you distinguish it for our customers?
Yeah, I think the key word there is it's hyper in hyperconverged. Hyper and hyperconverged basically relates to the hypervisor.
Right.
We just happen to have, I guess, probably what is considered to be the best hypervisor platform in the industry.
Not that we're biased in any way, shape, or form.
In any way, shape, or form, but we've been doing this for many years. And vSphere has a fantastic reputation for reliability, robustness, scalability. And embedded within that is our HCI software stack, which is obviously Virtual SAN. So Virtual SAN is part of vSphere, and when we started shipping back in 2014, the first version of Virtual SAN that went out the door was embedded into ESXi 5.5. So every customer out there that runs a version of ESX that's later than that has Virtual SAN's code sitting now in their data center, dormant, waiting to be used, because it's part of our standard platform. And the key thing is, if you're going to decouple the software and hardware from each other, the one thing you absolutely have to do is have a robust platform to build upon. If you're going to build this automation, you're going to add these workflows, you need to have a solid foundation. Like anything in life, whether it's a house or whatever it is, everything has to start from a solid base. And we spent many years engineering Virtual SAN before it was released, working side by side with the team that built the ESXi to make sure that foundation was there. And once you get the foundation laid, you then have the option to look at the broader set of partners that you can then go to provide the hardware for the x86 hardware that you need. And whether that's your existing preferred provider, that's fine. They'll have a solution for you. But one of the things that customers constantly feed back to is that they really like about this way of building up data centers, and that they really didn't think was a big key differentiator, is the ability to then be a lot more agile, and in terms of deploying new hardware or consuming new device types. For example, if you look in recent times, things like NVMe devices have become very popular. As obviously, as with anything, there's an early adoption phase, and then the prices will start to drop. To take advantage of those kind of devices, to get that competitive advantage into your infrastructure with a traditional storage approach, would be potentially a very difficult task, because potentially the array that you had wouldn't be able to support those devices until the next array, which could be 3 or 4 years down the line.
And very expensive, couldn't it?
And it may require some major upgrades on the hardware side to do that, if not a whole new purchase. Whereas with a HCI architecture powered by vSAN, you have a different mindset about how you're scaling out, because what we see customers typically doing is, as they're growing their environment, they're deploying clusters of a certain size. They'll maybe, whether it's an 8-node cluster or a 16-node cluster, and they kind of cookie cut those out. But every time they're making that additional purchase of the next amount of capacity, the server form factor might change, and there'll be a new set of devices available at the price point that they paid 2 or 3 months ago. Or they could even buy those devices and retrofit them into their existing vSAN nodes. And the ability to do that and swap layers out, which then bring additional business benefits, is something that's entirely new to them, and they love it, because it's that agility that they didn't have before. So that is, one of the big compelling, and I guess you could put that under the umbrella of operational simplicity, and that's been something that's really taken hold in customers, the ability to have that option and that flexibility.
So do you actually see that happening? Because I remember when we first talked about vSAN, one of the great benefits was its ability to scale up, scale out really easily. Adding nodes, yes, okay, understand that. But you can actually add disk or flash, whichever, these days it's probably always flash. And that's probably a theme we could come back to. But do we actually see customers doing that, adding storage capacity into existing hosts?
Yeah, absolutely, all the time. I mean, it's something that, as an application, needs may grow. And that need is not always a capacity need. It could be a latency need. It could be that the customers decided that their original choice for, say, the caching layer now needs to be maybe revved up a little bit. So they may want to increase the number of IOPS or the throughput to a host. They may want to add additional kinds of network cards. They may want to add an NVMe caching layer to give them that performance advantage. And we've seen that happen in multiple projects where the servers have stayed in the racks. They've put each one into maintenance mode round robin. They've replaced those devices, and then they've turned them back on, and they've got that performance boost that they needed. And we've seen that be successful in all kinds of applications. Some applications I can't talk about because they're maybe, so we should say, military in nature, and some that are kind of what we would see more in the commercial space. But yeah, absolutely, that's something that customers are doing.
But I think, the reference, and I want to come on to some of the use cases that you're seeing, but, the reference to military applications and other applications, to me, that signifies a level of acceptance of a technology or a solution when, it's trusted in those kinds of environments, and I know we can't say much more about it. So, we've talked about, in broad terms, the kind of capabilities. I'm always keen, because I know you always have some great stories about customer use cases, what kind of customer issues we're seeing that HCI and vSAN help to resolve, the old ones, the new ones. What are you seeing? I mean, I remember being surprised that, when we had that first survey a year on, and we put vSAN out as, use vSAN for your tier 2 and tier 3 workloads, and the feedback came, yeah, well, we're using it for our business critical apps, so does that continue? Are you still seeing that? Are you seeing new things?
Yeah, I mean, I think, one thing that we've definitely seen, and, it is great, but it's also, it puts us under a lot of pressure, is that as the platform has started to grow in terms of acceptance, obviously 2017, we passed the 10,000 customer mark. I think we were the first HCI vendor to do that.
Yep.
It means that you get more pressure on the customers on the kind of applications they want to support at different levels of scale. And sometimes it's not always about performance. It's about different ways that different applications want to sit on top of a software-defined storage layer. So if we look at things like Cassandra or Hadoop or Splunk, there's certain architectural changes that we're making into the vSAN so that it can be more suited to those applications. We have lots of customers using it today, but there's improvements that we could make, and those have been taken directly from customer feedback. And this is also one of the great things about the way that we built this, is that because we built it into our platform, into vSphere essentially, It means that our ability to inject changes and constantly enhance the solution is very, very flexible. And it's not the kind of solution where we stuck with a 1 year or a 2 year release cadence. Because we're part of the hypervisor, we can essentially inject those changes as and when we want to, and piggyback on standard vSphere release streams, whether that's a patch or an update or even an efix. As soon as those things are ready to go out of the door onto the VMware website for download, we can inject changes with them. So, we're constantly working with our 10,000 plus customers, and we are very proactive in getting their feedback on what would you like to see, what do you think is missing in certain areas, where could we improve. And that's just one example. If we look in the upcoming release that's due out at the end of April, we're adding some new capabilities around policy management for what we call shared nothing architecture applications, where the data protection and the resiliency is happening inside the application layer. There's a lot of work now happening around the Hatchway project, which is essentially volume drivers for things like Docker and Kubernetes, because there's a lot of customers now using that as the back end storage level for vSAN. It was interesting. We had one of our engineers was at an event recently, and he was speaking to a young developer that works for a company that I can't name, and he was telling him about his application and how great it was, and he asked the question. He said, "What do you use for storage for that application out of interest?" Not telling him that he was actually one of the lead engineers on virtual SAN. And the answer he got back was, "I use Cassandra for the storage."
Okay.
He said, no, what do you use for the storage? I said, Cassandra. He said, no, but Cassandra must run on top of something. So what does that run on?
Yeah.
I have no idea.
But isn't that really, does that exemplify the fact that it's all people in the technology space, but almost talking different languages, the infrastructure teams, the dev teams, the ops team, and we need to create that middle ground. And I think we do a good job of that.
Yeah, and I think the takeaway from that is it shows the importance to IT teams of moving to a very simple data center architecture with that kind of single operational model experience. And to allow them to service the needs. At the end of the day, IT are there to service the business. And if the business has teams of developers developing applications at a rapid pace for various social media platforms or devices, the people doing that work are not really that interested in data center infrastructure. They need to consume some kind of data services and storage services, either through an API or through a driver, but they ultimately don't care what it is. So, we've seen a lot of customers move to vSAN because it gives them that flexibility to be able to stand up those services in a very quick way with an enterprise class object-based storage architecture behind it, and then also scale it out at the rate that team of developers need. And, some of the customers that have done that successfully have done it not because it was a VMware product and they just had to have it. It was because it solved the business problem.
Yes. Yeah,
because it was something they couldn't do with a traditional approach. Because to get a new array in and get it on the floor in the data center and get it zoned and racked and tested was a time scale that was measured in a couple of months, versus their ability to acquire new servers and have those in the rack with the storage aggregated across the servers in an object oriented way with something like HCI and vSAN. They could do that in days.
And I think the other thing that I want to pick up on from that is something that I'm seeing is this, the location of the processing, the location of the data, more and more being generated at the edge of the network, not always for the classic examples are, of course, aeroplanes coming into land and you want to perform maintenance, or trains coming into the station, but more and more processing happening at the edge, and we don't have the time or the latency or the bandwidth to move the data to the processing. So instead, moving almost miniaturized copies of the data center to the edge. And I think HCI, from what you've told me in the past, has a huge part to play in that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you look at the use cases for HCI in those kind of remote locations, whether it's we have these kind of environments in very small form factors, and we're working on projects internally that we can't talk about yet that will reduce the size of them.
I thought you said we can't talk about them. All right, okay.
But the beauty of them is that they take the existing data center designs and you can collapse them down. One of the great things about HCI is it's not all about 2U, 4U, multiple socket servers.
Yes.
We're now seeing proliferation of support for, say, single socket servers coming out from the vSAN partners, and with that, we're also now seeing vSAN appearing in all kinds of mobile locations, whether it's going around under the ocean in some kind of vessel, or in an oil rig that's in the middle of an ocean somewhere.
Or war zone post offices we heard about recently.
Yeah. I mean, it allows us to then start to look at smaller form factors where you might have, almost kind of edge-side servers with single sockets in them, and a particular level of availability and resilience that can be dialed down in the software because it's maybe doesn't need the same level of protection that it would, say, in a core data center. And then package those up in a very small form factor to deliver them into those multiple locations inside a manufacturing plant, whether that's cars or whatever it is that's being built there. So certainly there's work going on in that space, and we've already seen in that kind of robo space, huge numbers of projects being rolled out live already, whether it's across the retail space or the military space or the oil and gas space or the medical space. We're seeing this as being one of the big demand areas for HCI with vSAN powered backend.
And lest anyone think that vSAN is purely, or HCI is purely designed as a robo solution, we're seeing some pretty chunky installations. I know you, for example, have spent time with, I don't know if we can name them, so a large media provider based in various countries in Europe, who are delivering on-demand TV and things from this sort of infrastructure, carrying enormous amounts of data.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we see environments anywhere from a handful of nodes up to thousands of nodes. Some of our large financial customers are running 3,000-4,000 nodes worldwide globally for HCI powered by vSAN.
Right.
So it tends to be one of these kind of patterns, and what you see is these projects will typically start quite small. There'll be a particular business problem that the customer has to solve, some new project that's come along, some new competitive threat that they need to respond to, and they need to roll out a platform quickly to allow the developers to kind of work on that. And what typically happens is once that is in place and that services starts to get consumed, that customer will very quickly kind of roll and repeat that. So within 12 months, 18 months, that environment can sometimes have grown 10, 20, 30 fold. We've seen customers start from as small as 4 to 8 nodes, and within a year be up to 350 nodes plus, and growing rapidly because they've started to deprecate their existing storage solution and move and pivot everything towards HCI.
I'm trying to move the slide on. I'm not listening to you, but I'm not having much luck with that, so we'll just leave it as it is. So it's before we try and claim that everything's all rosy, I want to push you on, where's it gone wrong? Where have we had customers have challenges? Where have we had challenges? I've sat in on feedback sessions, and I will again stress what you said, that we actively engage with customers of all sizes to get feedback to make it better. But can you point to areas where it perhaps didn't go as well and we managed to fix it along the way? Any good, nice, funny stories for me?
Yeah, I'll choose my words carefully on saying if they're funny or not, because the customers might be listening that are watching, so I'll be careful with what I say. But yeah, I think one of the interesting things that we learned is that when we initially launched this as part of the platform back in 2014, there was a heavy emphasis on the simplicity side of HCI and vSAN, and that is absolutely true. But there's also got to be some due diligence around choosing the correct hardware, sizing the platform correctly, and there are, shall we say, far better tools now available for customers and partners to use to quickly size the kind of environment they want, because there is two sides to choice. Choice is great because it gives you a lot of flexibility and you're not potentially, for want of a better phrase, locked into one hardware partner. But choice can also be confusing because you've got 150 different types of nodes available at different sizes. It would be like going into a store, and instead of having the usual small, medium and large, although it's probably not a big choice for you and me, it's, we know which size we are. But if there was 150 different t-shirt sizes with all different cuts, slim fit, skinny fit, large, small, whatever it was, you'd be there forever trying to choose. So that has caused us challenges, but it's a challenge that we had to face because we couldn't not have the choice. but with choice then becomes a little bit of complexity about, well, which one do I pick, and are the tools going to help me do that? And the tools were potentially not as, should we say, complete in the early days back in 2014 as they are today. So that's certainly improved a lot in recent years.
Talking of the tools, I mean, you hinted at, and I suppose we can be honest and say we have a new version imminent of vSAN and of course of vSphere. Is there any particular thing you'd call out as the next steps in that version and for the future in terms of directions?
Yeah, I think there's there's a couple of things that we're working actively on, and it's more about understanding what the existing storage profile looks like for your current applications, being able to take that into a virtual SAN design based on a generic set of profiles. And then once you have that information plus some room for growth, you then can take that information very quickly and easily into a kind of a bill of materials that you can then go work with your partner or hardware provider to get price. And that's ultimately what most customers just want. They want to get from A to B to C in a very quick way, but also an accurate way. And that's where the work and the tools and the sizing is focused to make that the reality, so that when you make that initial purchase of ready node, it's fit for use. And it's not something that you can be looking back on months saying, oh, I wish I'd have bought a slightly bigger drive here, or I didn't understand what I did there. And it's just making the tools a little bit more intuitive. So that stuff is some of that's already happened, and some of that stuff, as you correctly say, is about to happen. But the key thing that I would say is that if there's ever any confusion in that space, anybody watching or listening, there are lots of resources out there available to you. If you haven't been to the VMware website in a while, the storage and availability business unit, we have all of our material now available on a central portal that we call Storage Hub. So that's, if you just Google Storage Hub, at vmware.com, then you'll find that very easily. So all of the material for virtual SAN and things like vSphere replication and SRM is all bundled in there. It's very easy to navigate. It's got a very clean interface. So there's everything that you need there, from sizing guides, POC guides, network design guides. There's an absolute wealth of information there. And some of it is links to, I guess, should we say, more, maybe intuitive content to sample. So there's a YouTube channel with lots of instructional videos. There's links to people like yourself sitting in a car, driving around, talking about HCI.
Guilty. So
everything is up there. So, if you take one thing away from today, it's go and have a look at the Storage Hub site. And there's the second element there is reach out to your partner or your OEM, because they've all got vSAN trained people. And if you're working with VMware Direct, we have a team of people globally and obviously across EMEA as vSAN specialists. So any questions we can answer during that initial kind of pre-sale stage, we're all here to help and advise. And there's so many of these customers out there. There's so many projects that are live that it's very unusual that we'll get a question that we haven't already answered before. So it's better to ask the question than not ask the question and then regret it later. So please reach out to us on those resources.
Yeah, I totally echo that. I have questions. I work with you guys regularly, and you are a superb bunch of folks who get back and answer things really quickly. So by all means, people, use and abuse them.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what we're here for.
Let's talk about how people get started. So some people viewing will already be using this, but plenty will not. So for example, we are recently brought to market earlier this year, I think, these HCI kits.
Yeah.
So what we've done is we've bundled together vSAN and vSphere, as I understand it. In the same way as we've done acceleration kits and essentials kits over the years. Put the licenses together, brought it to market, easy to consume. So, really committed to customer choice, as I say. You can still buy the individual components, or you can buy converged infrastructure, build it yourself, buy it bundled together, whatever works for you. So, important to mention the HCI kits, and I will stop you from stopping me for a moment and just do the marketing piece and say, I've been told by our marketing team that we currently have a significant customer discount on the HCI kits. I believe it's about 20%. So get in there and buy if you're on the market for that. The other thing I will repeat is what Lee said about using the various resources. Storage Hub is a fantastic resource. And it's an interesting thing that very often we have our own internal people using that now as a resource rather than the internal systems, because it just has everything together. So what about when things go wrong? What about, when customers have challenges? I understand that you're about to, talk about proactive diagnosis, proactive support. Do you want to expand on that theme and hey, we can tell people about it. They'll keep it quiet.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you look at, the traditional way of managing incidents, or how we work with customers from a support point of view, and I'll be careful what I say here, because I have a great relationship with all of the team in EMEA and globally from the GSS point of view. So if any of them are watching, apologies if I get any of the steps wrong. But I guess when you look at a solution like virtual SAN, where you've got all of your compute, storage, and networking out in your cluster, that means all of the diagnostic data, all of the telemetry data is all contained in a large set of log files that are all running in real time across those hosts. And I guess there's an element of concern from customers is that if we have an issue, or if we're doing a POC and we're seeing something that looks a bit strange and we're not too sure if it's just a config thing, or maybe we've got a driver mismatch somewhere, there's how do we figure all that out, and how long is that going to take? And I guess there was this perception that this is going to be a real kind of reactive experience. We're going to have to send up whole gigabytes worth of log files and then wait for a month and then maybe get an answer. And we're a bit concerned about that. But there was also contrary to that, the opinion that it should be simpler to diagnose this because everything's in a single stack. There's not multiple vendors involved here, so this should simplify it. And that's true, it does. But one of the things that we realized early on is that there was something else that we could do here to really enhance that experience. And part of that was the catalyst for something called the vSAN Health Service. So essentially within the solution itself, we have an interactive dashboard where it will essentially monitor itself from a configuration point of view. It will alert the customer to if there are any issues with config or setup, or any tests that we require to be passed that have now failed. And it's a very simple interface. It's kind of traffic light. So green is good, yellow is not so good, red is you should probably log a call and figure that out.
Yeah.
But when you see those things flash up, you can actually click on them, and it actually takes you to a knowledge base article to say what that problem might be, to give you the opportunity to potentially resolve it yourself without even having to raise a ticket. Now, if it's so that's something I say to customers and partners all the time. They'll call me and say, "Oh, we've got an issue," and I'll say, "Well, have you looked at the health dashboard?" No. And they'll navigate to it and say, "Oh, there's a whole bunch of stuff that's yellow and red that I didn't look at. I've ignored those alerts. Right, I'll go and look at this first." And they'll go and do that proactively. Now, that has become a massively popular part of the platform, the ability to have that information in a very simple digest format. But we've expanded on it. With every release of the software, we've added new checks in as we've learned things from the field experience, as we've learned things that customers have done. We've added checks and balances in so that other customers can benefit from other customer experiences. And we've also now in the latest versions changed this so that we can, if the customers are signed up for what we call the Customer Experience Improvement Program, which I encourage every vSAN customer to sign up for, we can now inject these things over the air, essentially. So we can do it through the power of the internet, and connection to this can be done through a proxy, so you don't have to expose your infrastructure to the World Wide Web. But it allows us to inject these alerts without you having to wait for the next version of the software that includes the alert, because that's kind of counterintuitive, right? If you patch to the version that includes the fix for the alert, but that's the first time you see the alert, then it's going to go green because you've already put the version of the software. What you want to know before you get to that stage.
Yeah.
So we moved to that kind of model a few months ago, but we do require, for various data protection and legal reasons, customers to sign up to the program. Doesn't cost anything. They don't have to send us anything in terms of they don't have to send any internal organs or anything like that. It's just a matter of signing a PDF and sending it back, and then we can use their telemetry data to more intelligently target and predict the kind of things that would be useful to them from an alerts and operations perspective. And customers that have signed up for this love it, because it now filters, to use the old cliche, they can now see the wood for the trees. I'm sure nobody out there who gets the emails from our support team every Monday with 350 new knowledge base articles.
Yeah.
I would be very surprised if anybody dialed in today will admit to actually diligently reading all of those to figure out which ones actually apply to them. We don't do that. I don't do that. I just file them away in a folder somewhere in Outlook and never look at it again. What you really want is the system to cherry pick the ones that do apply to you for your hardware, your platform, and actually pull them out and say, here you go. These are the things that you need to think about and potentially react to.
So let me, given the environment that we are in these days, security is always paramount. So I want you to be absolutely explicit so that people understand what is exposed, what isn't exposed. Are we transferring log files? Are we not? You know, what, because we asked for permission to do this, but what exactly are people giving permission for? I think the benefit is unquestionable, but you know, you may be in a jurisdiction or an industry where you're limited in what you can expose. So do you want to just address that as a really...
Yeah, and the reality is that they're not transferring anything to us that they wouldn't be already in the course of a ticket.
Yeah.
They're sending the logs. What you're really authorizing us to do, I guess, and it probably differs between country on how these regulations work, but you know, at a high level, we're not really allowed to target specific information at a specific customer without their permission. So you know, if they say, right, it's okay for you to look at the information I provided in my log files and make a judgment on that, and say, okay, you're running a certain kind of hardware, therefore if I see alerts for that hardware, I can make them obvious to you without you having to go and dig them out. So it's quite simple really what it does, but we're not allowed to do it without that sign off. So it's bizarre in that we're not allowed to do that, but we need the customer to sign up to that so we can have that proactive relationship with them. And you know, I haven't had any resistance from any customers yet to sign up to that. And the only reason they haven't signed up to it typically is they weren't aware that these new features are there. So this ability to do this on the fly is massive. And you know, there's another side to this as well, that we've built a whole new dashboard portal for our support team, so that when the customer's log file turns up, then this is essentially, there's an automated process now where that's extracted, analyzed by an internal system that then pushes all of that information immediately up into a very rich dashboard that the support representative can look at and very quickly help get to the root cause of the problem. So they're not sitting there with your 500 gigs worth of log files with grep or sed looking for patterns, which is what I think some customers think when they're uploading all these log files. They just think, oh my God, this is going to take weeks to analyze. That information is essentially extracted immediately and then presented up to the support team. So that's a huge benefit to the customer and a huge benefit to the time it takes us to close and turn tickets around. And we're already seeing the fruits of that in the field in real time.
Yeah, and of course we have the classic situation where as more and more customers take part in this, the volume of data that we have or the quality of it gets richer. So it can only get better as we go.
Yeah.
I do want to call out something for our viewers as we come towards the end of this. Yes, of course, get all your resources from, just go to Storage Hub. Everything's linked from there. Take a hands-on lab if you want to learn more about it. But I would encourage everybody to, if you're already a vSAN customer or if you're considering vSAN, then go to version 6.6, start there. And I will call something out within that, which is that version 6.6 of vSAN requires that you update your vSphere version as well to 6.5 update 1.
Yeah, so you've got to go to 6.5.
6.5.
Yeah.
And if you're and we know that some of our customers don't, necessarily stay up to date with version numbers. I'm sure we're all guilty of that at various points with home labs and the like. But I will just quickly point out that vSphere 5.5, which some customers are still on, the end of general support for vSphere 5.5 is in September of this year, September 2018. So please do start planning your update processes, not only to get the goodness of the latest versions of vSAN, but also to ensure you stay current on support. So Lee, as we come to the end of this, you've talked about the scale capability. You talked about customers doubling, trebling, quadrupling the size of their installations. You've talked about the newer use cases towards the edge. You've talked about new sort of easier management and control and better reporting and diagnosis of challenges. We've touched on security because that seems to be a topic that you simply cannot do any kind of technology webinar without mentioning these days. What else? What's interesting and happening, and what keeps you excited in your role each day?
Yeah, so I mean, the role is, I think that the phrase is manic at the moment. It's very busy. Security, absolutely. I mean, obviously with things like GDPR coming along, there's a big emphasis on things like encryption. The version of vSAN that we already ship includes support for encryption with the appropriate license for that. So you can do, and that's all done in software. It doesn't require any specific hardware. We don't need self-encrypting drives. We just need the vSAN license that enables the vSAN encryption feature, and we can encrypt all the data at rest in the object store. So that's something that is being massively beneficial to customers, because to do it with a hardware-based solution was cumbersome. There wasn't a lot of drives available that were self-encrypting, and in most countries, if you had to then conform to something like FIPS 140-2, and then you apply that filter over the available drives, then the number of available drives went to almost nothing, and the capacities on them were very limited. So it meant that hardware choice doing it that way was really not attractive to most customers.
Yeah.
So vSAN encryption helps massively there. At the end of April, hopefully, in the next version of the vSAN, we've also now got FIPS 140-2 validation as well, because that's now been given to the ESX kernel module that deals with that. So that's another good tick in the box for alongside encryption for doing that. I guess the other thing that's really exciting now is that when we look at vSAN is becoming the cornerstone of our data platform within the kind of the on-premises workloads. But it's also now becoming the cornerstone of our hybrid cloud strategy. So we look what we're doing with the likes of, say, AWS and the services that we're standing up there. That's all being powered by HCI vSAN. So if your customers are looking at moving to that model, and I think most customers have realized with the changes in kind of data protection and data sovereignty regulations that a hybrid strategy for cloud consumption is potentially the way to go, and we're seeing that resonating massively in the market. Then obviously it means that from a storage point of view, we can all offer the same kind of enterprise grade architecture and storage abstraction model across your on-premises workloads and the off-premises workloads now. So it makes complete sense to customers that if they're going to go there, then they mirror the experience on both sides, and it's a seamless transition. So that's, I think, something that's really interesting, and it also opens up a whole different set of use cases for us in terms of things like data protection, data management, data governance, data analysis across multiple locations. I think ultimately that's our view of HCI as a company, and we have a long-term vision for where we're going to take this. And software-defined storage like vSAN is the enabler. Don't get me wrong, but ultimately it's about a simple operational model. That's what all of this is about. Whether that's across one site, multiple sites, a hybrid cloud, it's about a simple operational model. So when we look at where we're going to take data services in the next few years, vSAN will be there as the foundational pillar, but we're going to start and build on top of that, so that to allow customers, because ultimately the application owner just wants to consume storage data services.
So it's really that cloud foundation model where
Exactly.
you can either architect your own data center to a certain set of standards, and we make available things like VMware validated designs, which are the accumulation of knowledge from thousands of customers worldwide to help you build your own data center, or as you mentioned, VMware Cloud on AWS or multiple other cloud providers building public clouds using exactly the same technologies and features, so that Cloud Foundation is an architectural approach. And I think that's really great.
Exactly.
Customers can then make their choices about where they locate workloads and applications and data. So with that, as we come towards the end of this, and we really do need to complete it now, first of all, thank you to everyone for dialing in and logging in today. We hope it's been useful. We hope that all your questions have been answered by our experts while Lee and I have been chatting away. But if you have any that haven't been, we will absolutely get to that, and we will respond to you in the next few days. With that, Lee, thank you so much for
Pleasure, as
making the
always.
time, and look forward to the next one in 6 months' time when we have something new to put out there. So thank you very much and goodbye.
Thanks.